What's happening, folks? Welcome back to this week's video. My name's Cody, and in today's video I'll be showing you how I paint this horse in oils, and I'll also be sharing with you how to create strong and vibrant colors within your wildlife paintings. But before we get started, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and hit that bell to get notified every time a new video comes out. So with all that said, let's get started. Instead of beginning the painting on a stark white canvas, I decided to tone it with black acrylic paint. And the reason for this is it significantly helps with gauging your tone and color throughout your painting. I begin sketching out the entire scene using a bristle dagger brush using Naples yellow. And I did decide to rub in a little bit of titanium white and ultramarine blue so it contrasts well with that darker color I'm laying in behind the horse. And what I wanted to convey in this painting is the sense that this horse is bursting through a cloud of dust. And my favorite mix of colors to use for painting dust like this is burnt sienna, Naples yellow, a little bit of titanium white, and a touch of burnt umber. And you can find a full list of all the colors I used in this video in the description down below. I begin laying the first set of colors down on the horse's face using a mixture of burnt sienna, titanium white, Naples yellow, and a little bit of quinacridone magenta. And you've probably heard me say this in previous videos, but it's so important to save your tonal best for last. So don't go adding your brightest highlights and your darkest darks in the beginning stages of the painting. Rather, you want to be right in the middle. All we're trying to do in this stage is just to establish where the light and shadows are, and once that is firmly established, that's when we can go in with the detail. Now, this may look like pure titanium white against that toned canvas, but it's actually far from it. As you saw, I did mix a little bit of ultramarine blue into the mix. And my favorite brush to use while blocking in a painting is the bristle dagger brush. And you can find this brush at Rosemary & Co. and that link is down in the description as well. And another really important thing to keep in mind while you're in the block-in stage is to keep that paint as thin as possible. So I'd be sure to use plenty of Winsor Newton Liquid Original. And this medium can significantly speed up the drying time of the paint as well as the flow of the paint. So you can find that medium in the description as well. And I spent probably roughly around 3 hours on the whole block-in of this painting, and the block-in really shouldn't take you much time at all. So that's why that Liquid Original comes in handy, because you can do the whole block-in in one day, and the next day when you come back to do the detail, the whole painting is already dry. Now that that block-in layer is already dry, I start going in with the detail, first starting with the horse's mane. And not only does that dagger brush do a great job at blocking in the painting, it also does a great job at achieving those fine details that I'm achieving in the mane. Now, I decided to move the horse's ears back a little bit, as I felt that made his expression a little bit more intense. I began laying down those brighter highlights using a simple mixture of titanium white and Naples yellow. And even though these colors look very bright against that blocked-in layer, I still intend on going much lighter with those highlights at the very end of the process. I mix a little bit of burnt sienna, quinacridone magenta, and titanium white to achieve a bit of a cooler effect in the horse's face. Once I start laying down that pure titanium white on the horse's nose, it really starts to bounce off the surface and appear a bit more three-dimensional. And I mix a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber to achieve almost a black here in the horse's nostrils. I go ahead and darken the shadowed side of the horse's face using burnt sienna and burnt umber. And since there is so much reflected light around the horse, I do mix a little bit of ultramarine blue and titanium white to add a nice cool glow on the shadowed side of the horse's face. Now I can really start bringing out the three-dimensional effect within this painting, shooting for those darkest darks and the brightest highlights. And you've probably heard me say this before as well, but it's always good to constantly squint because that helps you gauge all the tones within your painting. Begin mixing the brightest highlights for the horse's face using a mixture of quinacridone magenta, cadmium red, Naples yellow, burnt sienna, cadmium lemon, and a little bit of titanium white. And adding these last minute highlights is one of my favorite parts to the painting because just with one dab with that brush and that whole area just jumps right off the canvas. And for a mid-tone, I mix a little bit of yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, and titanium white, which creates almost a bit of a green color. I began working on the shadows in the horse's body, mixing quinacridone magenta and burnt sienna, and this ends up creating a really nice earthy red color. And you've probably heard that if you mix yellow and red together, that creates orange. But if you mix quinacridone magenta and cadmium lemon and Naples yellow together, that creates an even stronger and intense orange. Now, at a distance, I did what I almost achieve a photorealistic effect with this painting, but when you got up close to it, it still had that very painterly quality to it. And since there is a lot of reflected light in this painting, I do mix ultramarine blue, quinacridone magenta, and titanium white to create a nice violet color on the side of the horse's body. And the same goes for the rest of the horse as I mix that really orangey color with a mixture of cadmium lemon, quinacridone magenta, and Naples yellow. And you might think in order to achieve a sense of realism within a painting is to add every little detail, but if you just focus on the shape, color, and light, there really isn't any need to do so. Now I am keeping those shadowed areas pretty subtle because when you look at a regular form in real life, you can't really see as much detail in those areas anyway. So I'd be sure to add a lot more detail in the highlighted areas and keep those shadowed areas very simple. And for those areas right on the edge of the most intense highlights, I use pure burnt sienna and blend it into the surrounding colors. Now that I'm finally nearing the end of the process, I can go in with the most intense highlights, and right here I'm using pure titanium white. And just when I can't think of anywhere else to lay down that brush, I think I'm going to call this painting finished. Well, that about wraps up this week's video, folks. Hopefully you came away with it with a couple new techniques that you can go and incorporate into your own wildlife paintings. Now, as always, you can find me on my website at CodyOldham.com or on Instagram at CodyOldhamArtist. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.